Okay, today is November 12th. This is the Curriculum and Instruction Committee meeting for November. It's a little after 6. We just say who's here. Julia Olafson.
Beverly Albright.
Rob Hurley. Kevin Strobel.
Michelle Sincerino.
Moses Rivera.
Megan Weber. Melanie Hepper.
Preston McKnight.
Shelley Mikowski.
Excellent. Okay, so we only have a handful of items. The one's going to take the most time, but still probably not that long, is our academic plan and curriculum review that Dr. Sincerino has prepared.
Okay, so can everybody hear me without the microphone? Okay. So you all have a copy of the whole plan in front of you, but we decided to do the Cliff Note version tonight. So as we talked about how we wanted to present this information, we came back to this SAS system. So what is on the board and what is the first page of what you have in front of you is just that SAS document or SAS picture with student achievement at the center of that. And so student achievement is obviously what matters to us here as well. And so we're not going to talk about all of those, and this really would be awesome if it didn't have to be a linear presentation, because it's really not linear. Everything kind of flows together, so to kind of make it linear is a challenge. So the very first part of what you have in the packet in front of you is assessment data for reading, for math, and then broken out into two subgroups, which is special education and economically disadvantaged. There's a lot of information on those pages. So what you have on those pages is cohort data for 3 years for students, and then comparisons across the county and across the Commonwealth. And with the exception of 3rd grade, which is this year's 4th grade, you'll see that our students perform better than the county and better than the state in most cases. And so the question just becomes, how do we make ourselves even better, right? And recognizing that certainly 65% of our kids or less is not necessarily where we want to be. So moving forward from there, and that's just a lot of information, and I gave it to you in print so you kind of have some time to digest it, and I'll certainly happily answer questions, but it's a lot of information and a lot of numbers on a page. So those are true cohorts. They are true cohorts. So those are kids that they're the same kids. So over 3 years, if they are current 7th graders, they are current 7th graders that we have data for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade all 3 years. So they're not just the kids who are 7th graders, and some of them were here in 4th grade, and some of them were here in 5th grade. They are just the kids that we have 3 years worth of data for. And that's true across math as well. Our math scores, you're going to see as we get kind of to what are we doing first, our math scores drove our decision to start with math. So we'll come to our decision to start with math, but we are going to start with math, and the test scores sort of bear that out.
So am I reading it correctly? 9th grade, you have in 6th grade, so in 6th and 8th grade, they went down.
Yep. Sure. So that's a good reason to start with math. So that's one of the reasons. Yeah, you were reading it correctly. Yes. Okay. So I pulled 2 subgroups out specifically because part of the new report cards that we have but don't have is that they put some of those federal accountability standards back in. So some of those old school accountability measures that were there are back as a part of our new accountability pieces. So this is our special ed data. There's certainly lots of stuff there that says, wow, we need to do some work on that. So that data is there. The local data is kind of interesting, and all of these numbers are as of my last conversation with Barb, which was like 11 o'clock this morning. So as of 11 o'clock this morning, today was, just for your reference, the 52nd day of school. So we have 57 referrals to special education since the beginning of the school year. That's a lot. And then we have 30% of our kids, so 1 in every 3 about kids sitting in our classroom has at some point been referred to special education over the course of time. So those are some numbers that cause us to say, we need to pay attention to what's going on with special ed. There are action steps, some things that we've already done, listed in the column to the far right there. We had Tom Warner, who's our special ed attorney, come in and do some work with our principals this summer. We had him come back in and do some work with our teaching staff at the beginning of the school year. We've got Michelle Maynard working as a special education learning coach. Scheduled some pretty specific math and reading intervention times. So we've got some things in process to kind of get at those referral pieces and then also hopefully at those performance pieces as well. The other piece that we've done is that we've added every other month to new teacher induction a special education mini session. So Shelley and or Michelle will come in and do some work with our newest teachers and their mentors around some of those special ed things that kind of keep popping up that we notice as trends. So that's there as well. And then we know that we need to do some ongoing professional development, things like classroom management, differentiating instructions, those kinds of things. So that data is there and definitely says we need to do something. I pulled our data for our economically disadvantaged students, not because they do any better or worse necessarily than any of our other kids, but it is a population that is a full quarter of our kids, and that's been a pretty consistent number for us. We also know that that's a piece that ties to some of the funding we receive, and we know that that federal accountability piece is back, and that there are potential steps and hoops and consequences to those kids' performance. So it's not anything right now that's jumping out at us, but it's just one of those pay attention to me kind of things. So that's there for you also. So, and again, in an attempt to be linear but not be very linear, the piece that impacts all of those scores is instruction. And instruction, there are 5 pieces up there. The first piece is a piece that is a hallmark of really what we're doing at the high school, and we're doing some really good work there, and really across the district. We've got our Act 339 plan in place. You'll remember I think about this time actually last year, the counselors presented their Act 339 plan to the school board, so that's up and running. We've got some great pathway stuff going on at the high school. We're participating in the Career Ready Burke piece. We've reassigned some counseling duties from the intermediate center up to the high school to support up there so that we can free up a counselor from the high school to start working on the internship program. So that career pathways piece is a strong piece for us, and a piece that's allowed us to make some partnerships with BCTC and RAC and to get our kids kind of a competitive advantage out there. So that's a real positive piece for us right now. The induction page has lots of little tiny print, but I'll leave that for you to write. But basically, we're kind of back in track here with induction. It was something that had a little bit fallen off the table, but we are back being compliant with what we need to do for the Commonwealth with that. Our new teachers met in October. Their mentors are joining them for those monthly meetings with us. So that's kind of a nice lens with some experienced folks and some new folks sitting around the table and having conversations around there. So there's a couple of pieces that, because it's sort of my life work induction, need a little bit cleaning up and polishing to make me happy with it. But it does get us to a place where our new teachers have a level of support again this year, which is important. Professional development keeps coming up. We are at a place where we sit really local. So we would love to get back to a place where we're able to sort of see the bigger picture of what's going on in schools. And there are great things happening in schools all over the place, so it's just the opportunity to kind of get back out and see what's going on in other places. But for now, we know that based on our walkthroughs, we need to take a little bit of a closer look at how we're using instructional time. There's a little tiny statistic there from last year's walkthroughs, where we spent 6 hours walking through math instruction, and it's only math instruction, but we observed that during 54% of the time that we were in classrooms, teachers were reviewing homework. And so with math scores looking like they're looking, that's an interesting statistic there as well. So we know that we need to come back to that. And we know that that's a calendar conversation, and we know that There's lots of other conversations that happen around professional development, but we know that we need to get back to a place where we're kind of job embedded and seeing kind of the bigger picture, not just what's going on here in Daniel Boone, but what's going on outside of Daniel Boone. So academic safety nets are those pieces that allow all of our students to kind of have a voice at the table and make sure that they're accounted for and that their academic needs are met. And these are kind of different than those sort of other safety nets that are out there. So different than counselors, different than SAP teams, those kinds of things. These are really, truly academic safety nets. So we know that we've got some daily specific data-driven interventions that are going on, both for enrichment and remediation. We know that we need to take a look at our resources. Do we really have everything we need to do that and do that well? So that's a piece there. And we know that as we kind of have our enrollment shrink, we know that we may have some resources that we can reallocate back to some of those safety nets that have been taken away. So reading specialists at the high school is an example. Gifted support at the high school might be an example of that as well. So some of those pieces we lost when we were going through that period of austerity, as we come back to a place where we may have extra resources, we can kind of reallocate those to help with that academic safety net piece. So then framework, the curriculum piece then becomes the next piece. And so what we want to be very clear on is that there is curriculum. And this is my attempt to be funny, and I'm not really funny, so this is my attempt to be funny. But we do have curriculum, but I give you as evidence where that curriculum sits. It is no lie that it sits on 3.5-inch floppy disks, or the higher technology of DVDs, or perhaps it got printed and it's sitting in a filing cabinet, or maybe it's under an inch of dust in a binder. But what we know is that the curriculum exists. What we know also is that it's not in a place that it's super accessible for teachers, certainly, and anybody else at building level, and anybody else with a computer that no longer has a 3.5-inch floppy drive or a CD-ROM disk in it, right?
It's on floppy disk. How old is it?
Well, the stuff that's on the floppy disk might be old. The stuff in the filing cabinet, we've discovered much of it that was actually not rewritten all that long ago. And specifically, language arts and math was not rewritten more than 3 years ago. So those tested subject curriculums, and you'll see why we can short-term some of those, were not rewritten all that long ago. There are some that are outliers, obviously, that it needs to be addressed, but it's not a state where there isn't curriculum. It's just in a place where it's not super accessible. And apparently the person with the 3.5-inch floppy drive disk is me. So.
And there's services that you can maybe look into and get that taken from that and put onto other than yourself.
Other than me?
That
Yeah,
might be a
that would
lot
be
less
awesome.
expensive.
You actually have a computer with a floppy drive?
Well, computer with I have an external drive that, because all of my doctoral stuff is on a 3.5-inch floppy drive, I wanted to take my induction stuff off of a 3.5-inch floppy drive, so I actually own one.
I'm just saying, from an expense standpoint.
I didn't even know that was
time or
possible.
something like
Right.
that.
So, and some of that drove a little bit of our decision-making in where are we going first. So last year, the board agreed to purchase the Ed Insight On-Hand School suite. That actually has a nice curriculum piece to it, and it is accessible to all teachers. Right now, it's empty because there's nothing in it. But moving forward, the plan is to take everything from where it is not accessible and put it into that on-hand school curriculum module piece. That obviously requires then that we train people in how to use that piece. But that is the plan, is to at least get it to be accessible. We're jumping up. Sorry. That's all right. You guys can turn that. All right, so that being the case, so if we go back to that SAS piece that we started with, the SAS piece has what are voluntary model curriculum. They are available for language arts, math, and science, so they're available for tested subjects. What is nice about them is that they're done, first of all, and they're a nice starting point, but they have a big idea, they have the concepts, they have the essential questions. They're also standards aligned, assessment anchor connected, and eligible content connected. So when you click on a specific standard, you get all the essential questions that go with it, and whether or not there is any eligible content or assessment anchor that goes with that particular essential question. So for us, this is a starting point. This is not by no means an ending point, but it's a good cost-effective starting point that can easily roll from where it is into the on-hand school. So we have a phone call into Ed Insight, and as we speak, they are in the process of taking those from the SAS website and putting them into that curriculum framework piece of on-hand school for us. Like I said, they're not the end-all and be-all, but they're an excellent starting point, and they are already aligned to tested content and those pieces and parts. So also the piece of that that's nice is the SAS website is also teacher accessible, so they can get on that. There are resources there, there are assessment questions there, all linked back to that essential question and that standard. Make sense? So what we know is that at the end of the day, we want our curriculum to be comprehensive, and we want our kids to be competitive, and we want our school district to be competitive. So we've brainstormed some of the things that we believe make the curriculum comprehensive, and that is by no means an exhaustive list, and it's probably, like any good plan, a list that changes as the world around us changes. But we know that we want our students to have lots of things and opportunities to choose from, and we know that when they go away from here, that we want them to lead, and we want them to be able to be problem solvers who are designing solutions to problems, as well as just kind of solving them. And we want them to have a little empathy and leave the world with some resilience, leave us with some resilience to kind of handle the world around them. And we know that for our community, it's good to be the place where people want to be. Right? There's some economic impacts to that, there's some societal impacts to that, all of which are good for our kids and our community. So the last piece, and I don't know that it's the last piece, and I put Maslow there on purpose, the last piece of this SAS framework that applies to some of the work we're doing now is that safe and supportive schools piece. And this is the piece that connects kids to school, and it's the piece that keeps kids feeling like they're safe when they're here and feeling like they're engaged in what's going on. And I put Maslow next to it because we all know that Maslow, if kids don't feel safe first, they're not going to learn. So while I'm not sure that this is really last, maybe it should be first, but for the purpose of tonight, it's last. So one of the big pieces that we're doing, and you've seen this SEL cohort on a couple of board agendas where we've asked permission for kids to attend the field trips and those pieces and parts, is that we are participating in the social emotional learning connections program this year as part of the wellness grant. Why we're doing that is a lot of the same evidence that came up in other pieces and parts of this presentation. But we have been kind of at this since July, where Tom Stecker came in and did 2 days with our administrative team. Shelley and I spent a day with our bus drivers, trying to help them better understand how to manage some situations on their buses. I don't know how successful we've been, but we made a good faith effort. And we've also given them the equipment per se, but we've given them everything they need on their buses to do positive behavior support and match kind of what's going on, in particular in our primary and intermediate center. So this learning cohort is all year. You can see that it includes all of the voices in our community, including Thursday. We're bringing some students down to the Chester County IU. We often talk about not being able to legislate their achievement. So this is actually a session this week on closing the achievement gap. And so asking kids their perspective on that gap, I think, is important, and it's often a step we forget. As we speak, members of the core team are in buildings kind of taking a look at what are the messages we send about being welcoming and being engaging and being a place where people feel safe and want to be. And then, of course, that will drive any decisions we make about professional development moving forward. So that piece is going on as we speak. So what are we doing now? And now being now. I included the summer because I think it's important to kind of see what we were doing this summer. I missed the one date, but starting last week, with November 7th was a date that we had an administrative council meeting. We have asked the principals to go back to their buildings, and I started getting emails, but we've asked them to go back and kind of make us a list of everything they're doing in their building that counts as a safety net. And we've asked them particularly to focus on math. So they're doing that as we speak. On November 19th, and you'll see it again repeated, but on November 19th, the assistant principals are meeting with Charlie Travato from the intermediate unit to do a half-day mini data retreat on root cause analysis. So to kind of take a look at all that data that's on the first couple of pages of this report and figure out what it tells us. What are the next set of questions it causes us to ask, and what decisions do we need to do moving from there. We're also going to, starting next week, because already next week is November the 20th, we're going to call it a math curriculum sprint. You can call it whatever you want, but that's what we're calling it. We're going to take a look at those voluntary model curriculums, the curriculum that was rewritten. As near as we can tell, that math curriculum was written in the summer of 2015 through like the school year of 2016. So it's really not that old. So we're going to take a look at the documents that we have, the documents that the state has, make sure they're aligned, make sure that we're covering eligible content, and then begin to put together a pacing guide to ensure that that eligible content is covered prior to testing. And we're going to kind of take that through. So I've tasked Mr. Spores and Mr. Rivera and Mr. Fleming are going to meet with me next week, and we're going to start that work. We'll bring it back to the rest of the administrative team to take a look at it. December 12th, just as a date of interest for you, several of the administrators are going with me to the IU for a training on guided math. We're taking some teachers and some math specialists with us as well, with the understanding that they need to come back and cross-train folks, or at least share the information they learn. And then you'll see that data retreat repeats itself with the principals, so same conversation at probably a different level. But again, that root cause analysis, what's going on. So by just the end of December, by Christmas break, we should have all that kind of root cause conversation beginning to happen, and math at a place where we're feeling like it's pretty well aligned and we've got some pacing guides in place. If you turn to the short term, and I included the short term to be like really the second semester of the year, some of those dates repeat themselves because they kind of fly over top. By the middle of January, we're going to have all that math stuff done, leading up to our January 18th in-service date. We do think it's important to sit down with the teachers and kind of come together and make sure that what's going on is something that they can also agree with. But one of the things we've heard, and I think is true, is that teachers felt like this wasn't prior. It was one teacher who wrote the curriculum, and kind of that was it. And so we're going to take that January in-service day and use it as an opportunity to sit down with those pacing guides with whole grade level teams and just make sure they're reasonable and the teachers feel like they can accomplish the material in the time that is on that map. And then that gives us a chance to kind of come back and be recursive about that if they don't. And again, and then you'll just see that in the course of the next month there, that process repeats itself for language arts. And again, for the same reason, the voluntary model curriculum is there. Our language arts curriculums were not rewritten all that long ago. And so just to kind of get us to a place where by the end of this school year, math and language arts are, one, accessible in the system, and that we have pacing guides to start the 1920 school year. That's crazy, the 1920 school year. And then we know in the process of kind of doing this work, we know that there are some singleton classes out there. The one that's sitting on my desk right now is introductory guitar. So we know that some of those were written or were sort of written or were not totally written. So we know that we need to come back and take a look at those, make sure that they're complete, and that they are also available in that system and accessible to folks, and really so that they become turnkey. You don't ever want curriculum to be the domain of the person whose idea it was, who wrote it, and then retired, went somewhere else, and now nobody knows what was in their mind because it's still in their mind. So that takes us through the end of this school year. Long term, obviously everything that's on a floppy disk, CD-ROM, folder, binder, whatever, needs to be somewhere where everybody can get at it in a reasonable way. We know that this process of curriculum writing took a backseat to some of the austerity pieces that were going on, and so that needs to come back together. We felt it was really important to start with the math and the language arts, so that's why we're starting there. We've had a little bit of a conversation, we can continue the conversation about how do we want to go about approving new courses. Do we want to have the curriculums written before we approve them, or so we just want to have a conversation about that, and whatever it is, awesome. We know that we're working to develop a comprehensive internship program. That's not something that one person can probably miraculously do between now and June, but it's a growing piece, and we've partnered with the IU and the rest of the county for those opportunities for our kids, so we know that that's there. We know that we've kind of sat in a place where we maybe haven't bought those enrichment materials or those remediation materials, so we really do have to look and see, are there pieces that we still need? Do we have what we need to get kids those things? And we've clearly invested an awful lot of money in technology, and so are we using those pieces the best we can to support student growth and achievement and success, and for the teachers too. So all of those pieces are long-term pieces, but probably have answers as we continue to work through things. And you'll see that the technology piece shows up in the professional development pages and other parts of this piece as well. So yeah, that's the Cliff Notes version.
Okay. I just had a couple of questions. I think it makes sense that math and English language arts are first on the list, and that they're being those two, I guess the state recommended curriculum and our curriculum are being blended and checked against each other and all that stuff in a sprint model, and that I understand why that's the plan, but when we get to next year, I'm assuming we'll be identifying the next things to be dealt with. Will it also be a sprint model at this point, or are we going to have to kind of wait and see?
Maintain the sprint process, but we felt it was really important to be able to start next year with those tested pieces being solid in place, and that necessitates the sprint piece of it. I don't know that everything else needs to be a sprint. It also doesn't need to be a marathon.
Got it.
It could be a nice 5K.
Will we have some by the end of the year? If this is what we're doing now, I mean, by the end of the year, will we have an idea what the targets are for next year, and what each discipline, what the how much we want to get done each year, and and how when they are scheduled to happen. Okay.
I think long term, like, what's the ultimate, when do we hit that final end?
You never hit them.
I know you keep rewriting them, but
Right.
how many years does it take to get through?
In the past, it's been, 6 or 7 years? 6 years.
6 year cycle.
Okay, so 6 years.
And that is something I believe the administration might be looking at, whether or not that's what makes sense, or if there should be changes. But, there's also, when we talk long-term, we'll have a new boss soon, and so that person will have some input. I didn't think it made sense for us to be looking much past the school year.
This was more of a
Yeah.
question.
No, I understand,
I always ask questions like, who uses this material? Teachers? And if so,
In
has
theory,
anybody been griping about, the labs not being able to access any of the stuff that's
They,
on floppy disks? I mean,
they
that,
don't-
there's
Right, we haven't done any training on it.
if nobody's using it now,
Right.
because it's not accessible, we get all this work done, is it something they've been crying for, needing, or something that we're going to prepare, put it out there and get used?
Well, I think what you've watched is done, right? So I think it's important that teachers, one, know how to get at it. Right now, it's just not in a format that's super easy to get at. So I have, for the new teachers, PDF them over their curriculums, but it's not, like in theory, you would like a new teacher to be able to log on to EdInsight and pull their curriculum up. End game, that's where we'll be. It's just, it's not something obviously that happens, in the sprint model. At the end of the sprint model, my hope is that it will be accessible in easy.
All the material accessible.
Of what we've done,
That point.
right, of what we've done. The SAS framework is accessible to teachers now, if they choose to go there and do that. And it might be a professional development need to come back and say, hey, does everybody even remember that this is here?
I have a question on the economically disadvantaged numbers. Is there comparative numbers for the rest of the students? I mean, there are stats in here. I assume these are our stats for...
The ones on the left are ours.
Right.
So those are just, the rest of the kids would be the kids back on the reading and math page.
Back on the reading and
So
math.
that if you go back to the first 2 pages of that section,
Yes.
that's the whole body of kids. In that page that's just reading and just math.
So all the grades take
After
the
he's done.
PSSAs?
Yep.
Okay. And this is a combined.
Yeah. So that the economically disadvantaged factors out as a district, not.
Okay. Yeah, and it looks like math is particularly low.
Oh, and which is why we've made the decision to start with math. The data certainly bears out that needs our immediate attention.
Did you have any questions?
She feels like she just sat there and answered.
Huh?
So she probably feels like she just sat there and answered.
Pretty much, yeah. I just did this on my lunch. Is that just proficient or is that proficient and advanced?
Proficient and advanced, it's both.
It's both. And so you're saying they're the exact same kids tested in 15, 16 as 17, 18. So they're going down. Gotcha. All right.
Anybody else have any insight, comments, questions?
It's a lot, so my proverbial office door is always open.
I,
There's a lot there.
because of the fact, and I want to hear what the other members of the committee think, because of the fact that hopefully sometime in the next couple of months there will be a new superintendent, and I know we want to give a more full report to the full board, but does anyone have an issue with waiting until we have a new superintendent to make that happen? I mean, everybody can listen to this recording, everybody on the board can listen to this recording for now, and Dr. Sinserpino may be able to send this information to the other members so they can follow along at home in the interim. But do you guys have an issue with waiting? Because I know we had not given the rest of the board a
Right, and we're going to
firm
have
time
to
period.
continually repeat it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Do you have an issue with waiting just a month or two?
No.
Okay, all right. So then we'll go ahead and do that. Thank you very much for putting the information together, and I am glad that Mr. Scott was able to at least listen to some of it, because I know that there were some concerns that specifically he had. So, all right. So I gave to the next thing on the list is the class additions, but the class additions are actually on page. Is it 9? I know it's in here somewhere. Yes, 4 and 5. Page 4 and 5 of the draft of the high school course catalog that we will get to. That's the next thing we're going to talk about. Actually has listed the information for the proposed class additions that Mr. McKnight brought to us last month. Is there anything you want to say about them that you didn't say last month?
No, just I'll take your questions if you have.
Okay. I think there was one person, were you, was there somebody who wasn't here for the CNI meeting last month and didn't hear him talk?
I wasn't here.
You were gone?
I wasn't.
Okay. The computer science, the AP classes are pretty straightforward. The curriculum is set by the National AP committee, or not committee, the company that runs the AP program. And so they are pretty straightforward. That will align the textbooks or any textbooks purchased with what it's kind of limited. We when we offer the course, that person is trained by the AP people, and so there isn't a lot for us to take liberty on how those two courses are offered.
I was just looking at the computer science where something does jump out. That they're really going to teach in Java.
That's the prescription, correct? And John Oram is the person who will be leading that effort.
Okay. Seems odd for an introductory language in 2018.
This is beyond us. This is
Eventually,
from the College Board, which was saying the College Board is who prescribes.
eventually the College Board might change the prescribed language. It could happen. I mean, they will eventually. I'm sure it was taught in something else at some point. We were kind of. It is what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Learning any language is fine.
Got to start somewhere, right? The entrepreneurship course, as Dr. Sincere Pino just mentioned, this is not a full curriculum. It's more bullet points because the teacher doesn't even know if the course is going to be approved. So it's not like they're writing a full curriculum for this class. So the bullet points are there for what's going to be covered in the class. And as Mr. McKnight had said at the meeting last time, for the textbook needs, NA was written on the form because they were going to be going with something through our Apple Suite. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, not our Apple Suite. They already have used a material, an online program.
Oh, that's right.
in the business
I apologize.
department, Which the entrepreneurial piece is a component of that, so there won't be an additional cost there.
So that was one thing that I did want to point out. And there is no curriculum obviously for the internship. That is something I was hoping you could speak to the internship one, because for the people that weren't here for your presentation last time.
So in terms of the internship, we have based it basically off of Arizona State's internship model and their vetting process. We looked at a number. We looked at Twin Valleys. We looked at a bunch of local groups and how it's happening in the high school. And one of the concerns that came out that you should consider is, and we feel strongly that the vetting process, which our guidance counselors do, to allow students to enter the business has to be formalized, which it is being formalized right now. Because we don't, for example, not that we're against small businesses or side businesses, but they would not be providing the kind of safety and structure that we would be looking for. So we would want them to be with groups that obviously have the right insurance, the right structure, the right corporate structure. Otherwise, they wouldn't be approved for that kind of an internship. So that was an area that is a little gray when you're trying to find opportunities for students. Additionally, the credit value that you can earn up to 1 credit in an internship opportunity, but PDE requires the credit attainment be based on quote-unquote hours. So a regular course is about 150 hours for 1 credit. So you half it, 75 for half a credit, and then approximately 40 or so for a quarter of a credit. So that would be how we would apply the credit to it as well.
And will there be a teacher or a guide?
Somebody that could be a teacher, however.
No. Will there be a teacher responsible for monitoring where this, or will it be through guidance? It will be through guidance. Okay.
So to Dr. Sincerapino's point, and Mr. Hurley, we reallocated one of the counselors just a piece of her responsibility out of the intermediate center.
Okay.
And she basically took on 60 GIPs, which are consuming in time, but they're usually pretty heavy on the front side. That then allowed us to reduce the GIP level for each of our counselors at the high school, which then we recast and loaded with the internship model.
Okay.
So they actually communicate weekly with the intern opportunity, track it, have feedback, written reports, and so forth.
That's
Mr. Mc-
also the piece that the IU is creating the clearinghouse for, so that we don't have all the districts in the county going.
Oh, had everybody
going
vetting
at
the same, then,
people
okay.
asking for internship opportunities. They will have an opportunity to put their opportunities, as businesses, put their opportunities into that clearinghouse.
Okay.
And say, for example, we can take 4 kids to do X, or, and because the Career Ready piece is a K to 12 piece, they're also putting in the opportunities that they can bring to us, because we have to have something for our little kids to do too. It's not just the internship piece at the high school. Students from kindergarten through are required to have proof that they've participated in these career opportunities all the way through school. So they're going to put in things that they can come out and do, also not just opportunities for our kids to go to them.
Okay.
So that'll be when it's fully up and running, that'll be a nice.
I was just wondering how the internship and apprenticeship credit fits in, because as I'm to understand, those 60 credits are it's pretty regimented, exactly how many they need to take each year to fulfill the 60 credits by the 4th year. So how is
The what credits?
the 60 credits for the RAC program?
Oh, okay, so that's a little bit exclusive from that particular, you're talking about the associate's degree program.
So these are not interchangeable?
Well, I mean, they're not designed to be interchangeable, but they're not exclusive either.
Okay.
I mean, for example, if your daughter gets to a point where she finds an internship, I mean, it's a 1 credit piece, and the flexibility around the internship time can happen at that student's convenience. It could also happen in senior release. So the internship apprenticeship piece is designed for 11th and 12th grade.
Right.
Where our students' credits tend to diminish. They take a lot in the first 2 years, and then they have a little less in 11th, and then in 12th grade they have a pretty good opportunity.
Okay.
Now, somebody who's focused in the dual enrollment and or associate's degree program will not have quite as many windows. There's only so much that they can
Right.
do, which is true.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions before we decide if we're going to recommend these 4 additions to the board? What say you? You have a problem with yes?
I do not
Yes?
have a problem with anything.
Yes, 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 okay,
Yeah.
and I say same. So we'll tell that to the board today, although they will not be voting on the, what is this thing called? The catalog. Until next week. I reviewed the catalog. I will have a list of edits that are just like typos, as always.
It's a draft, and the edits are on my desk now.
Love it.
Okay,
Please send them along.
I will.
As you did last year. That's not a problem. However, if you do get questions at the...
But if there's anybody has any issues that are substantive today, like that have to do with what the actual content versus typos, bring them up.
As Megan can attest, that she used to be my right-hand typer. Well, now we have 3 guys doing that work, and nobody's very good at it. So we continue to scrub along, but not so well.
I did.
But the question you may get is cost on these 4 new.
Yeah.
And they are cost neutral once teachers are trained when they go to AP Institute and so forth.
Yeah.
There's not a significant cost anywhere in any of those 4 courses.
Okay.
Right. And so I reviewed other than the changes with the additions of those 4 options. I don't know how much of the pathways section at the beginning it gets clearer every year. So that's good. I also think it might be just that repetition for me makes it that I know what's going on a little more, and so I'm starting from a point where I actually know what a pathway is instead of where I was when my kids were younger. But it seems to be making more sense to me than it did like 3 years ago. So.
So this is really just being tweaked for year over year, is it?
Correct. Yeah, there weren't major changes this year. So I'm leaving the option open that, as people, we've they gave this to the rest of the board last week. And so if anybody has real issues with it, it's going to get pulled, obviously it'll get pulled from the voting meeting next week, and we'll have to do it in December. But barring anybody having substantive issues other than edits, I think we'll be ready to vote on it next week. So I totally understand, we got competing interests that, sometimes the board wants to hold on to things a little longer to like sit and hash them out a little longer, and that's fine. But I do want to get them in the hands of the guidance counselors for especially bringing them to the ninth graders earlier than we did last year. I know that was partly because of not having a C&I meeting in December last year, which was unavoidable, but it still happened, and it made life less fun for the guidance folks last year. So I would like to avoid that. So if anybody has edits, you can either send them directly to Preston, or you can send them to me, and I'll send them to Preston by Friday.
He already has other edits from you that aren't.
No, I told him I have a list. I haven't sent it yet.
Okay.
So
there are
I gave
other.
you this, we know that there are edits, we vetted it several times.
Yeah, they know.
That's why the draft is printed all over everything.
yeah, we just wanted to get it in your hands, and
I just wondered if I reviewed this, I didn't want to make the same edits.
and that's why I said if you want to send them to me, and then we could, I could if you want to see what my edits are, I could get them to you by like Wednesday. And then if you have more, then you can give them to me.
Okay.
You want to do it that way?
Yeah, that'd be good, yeah.
I'll do that for the four of us. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. All right. That was all I had on my list. Does anybody else have anything else? It's been such an uneventful week. All right. Anything from the public? All right. I'm calling the meeting adjourned. If everybody's okay with that.
I am.
Awesome.
I have a question.